7 Buddhist lessons to free yourself from fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety have become the defining emotions of modern existence. In a world overflowing with uncertainty, digital noise, and constant comparison, many people live as if their hearts are always under siege. The ancient teachings of the Buddha, however, point toward a radically different way of being, a path of liberation that does not depend on changing the external world, but on transforming the inner one. These teachings are not bound by time, culture, or religion. They are tools of awakening available to anyone who wishes to see clearly, live peacefully, and transcend the restless nature of the human mind. Buddhism does not promise a life free of problems, but it reveals that suffering, dukkha, is not inevitable. It arises from misunderstanding, attachment, and aversion, and it dissolves when wisdom and mindfulness illuminate the mind. The Buddha did not ask his followers to believe in something unseen. He invited them to look deeply into their own experiences, to test the truth for themselves, and to see how suffering begins and how it can end. This text explores 7 profound Buddhist lessons that can help anyone free themselves from fear and anxiety. Each lesson is not just philosophical, but practical, rooted in centuries of practice and experience. The goal is not to become detached from life, but to engage with it in a way that is grounded, compassionate, and free. Before we begin, it's essential to understand that Buddhist liberation is not a sudden escape from pain, but a gradual awakening from illusion. Anxiety often emerges when the mind projects into the future, while fear arises from clinging to the past or resisting what is. The path to freedom lies in learning to dwell in the present moment, not intellectually, but experientially, where peace naturally exists. So, as we walk through these teachings together, allow yourself to slow down, breathe deeply, and reflect. The transformation you seek does not come from forcing yourself to be positive or let go, but from seeing reality as it is. When understanding replaces ignorance, freedom arises naturally. Understanding the nature of fear. Fear is one of the most primal emotions in human experience. It is the instinct that once kept our ancestors alive in a dangerous world. Yet, in the modern age, it often becomes distorted. The threats are no longer saber-toothed tigers or harsh winters. They are deadlines, opinions, failures, and imagined futures. The Buddha understood that fear is not inherently wrong. It becomes suffering only when the mind attaches to it. To free yourself from fear, you must first understand its true nature. In Buddhist philosophy, fear is seen as a byproduct of attachment and ignorance. We fear losing what we love, not getting what we want, or facing what we resist. Beneath all forms of fear lies the illusion of a permanent self that believes it can be harmed. When the Buddha spoke of anatta, no self, he was not denying our existence, but pointing out that what we take to be me is a constantly changing process, not a fixed entity. Fear clings to the idea of a solid I, but when that illusion dissolves, fear loses its grip. To understand this, imagine a storm passing over the ocean. The surface becomes turbulent, waves crash and roar, but deep beneath, the water remains calm. The mind works the same way. When you identify with the waves, your thoughts, your fears, you are tossed around by every gust of anxiety. But when you recognize your true nature as the vast ocean beneath, you discover a stillness that fear cannot touch. Meditation is the practice that allows you to access this depth. It is not about suppressing fear, but observing it without reaction, until you see that it comes and goes like clouds across the sky. The Buddha taught that fear arises from craving and aversion, the twin roots of suffering. Craving wants things to be different from how they are. Aversion rejects what is present. Together, they create a restless tension that manifests as anxiety. For example, when you fear losing your job, it's not the job itself that causes pain, but the attachment to stability, identity, or approval that the job represents. The mind clings to control, and when control is threatened, fear arises. The antidote is mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness invites you to see fear as a transient mental event rather than an identity. When fear arises, the practice is simple but profound. Acknowledge it, breathe with it, and observe without judgment. Breathing in, I know fear is present. Breathing out, I smile to my fear. This simple act of awareness transforms the relationship. Instead of being trapped in fear, you become the witness of it. Over time, you begin to notice patterns. Fear is not a solid wall, but a sequence of sensations, thoughts, and memories. It builds, peaks, and fades. Through observation, you learn that you are not your fear. You are the awareness behind it. This realization weakens its hold. It is like waking from a nightmare and realizing that the monster was never real. The Buddha also emphasized compassion, karuna, as an antidote to fear. When the heart opens with compassion for oneself and for others, the walls of separation crumble. Fear thrives in isolation. Compassion thrives in connection. To cultivate compassion, start with yourself. Acknowledge your vulnerability without shame. Instead of judging your anxiety as weakness, treat it as a teacher. Every tremor of fear is an opportunity to awaken. The Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness, teaches the practice of sending goodwill to all beings, including oneself. When you silently repeat phrases like, "May I be safe," "May I be free from fear," you reprogram the mind to respond to fear with kindness rather than resistance. This gentle turning of the heart gradually dissolves the sharp edges of anxiety. There is also a deeper layer to fear that Buddhism illuminates, the fear of impermanence, anicca. All things change, and the ego resists this truth. We cling to youth, health, relationships, possessions, and even ideas of who we are. But the more we fight against impermanence, the more anxiety grows. The Buddha's insight was not to deny change, but to embrace it fully, to see that impermanence is not a curse, but the foundation of freedom. Because things change, renewal is possible. Suffering cannot last forever. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is not resignation. It is awakening. When you accept the truth of impermanence, you stop clinging to what cannot stay. The fear of loss dissolves because you understand that there was never true possession to begin with. Life becomes a dance of appearances, each moment precious because it is fleeting. Another dimension of fear is the fear of death. Almost all anxiety traces back to this root. The Buddha faced this fear directly and invited his followers to contemplate death not as a morbid obsession, but as a practice of freedom. When you truly see that death is inevitable, you stop wasting life running from it. You begin to live more fully, love more deeply, and act more wisely. Fear loses its power when you no longer avoid the truth. Meditation on death, Maranasati, reveals that what we call I is a series of changing conditions, body, sensations, thoughts, and consciousness. None of these are permanent. So, who is there to fear death? When this insight ripens, fear transforms into reverence. Life becomes a miracle, each breath a gift. To apply this in daily life, bring mindfulness into every situation that triggers anxiety. When you feel afraid, pause and breathe. Notice where the fear manifests in your body: tightness in the chest, trembling, restlessness. Instead of running from it, bring gentle attention there. Name it silently. Fear, fear. This labeling practice, recommended by Thich Nhat Hanh and rooted in early Buddhist texts, helps you disidentify from the emotion. You are no longer the fear. You are the one who knows it. Over time, this awareness deepens. You begin to live from a space that is not reactive, but responsive. Fear becomes a signal, not a master. It points you toward areas of attachment and invites you to let go. The Buddha said, "He who conquers himself is the greatest warrior." True courage in Buddhism is not about defeating enemies, but understanding the mind. Freedom from fear does not mean that fear never arises. It means that it no longer rules your life. You can walk through uncertainty with a calm heart, trusting the flow of existence. The more you practice mindfulness, compassion, and insight into impermanence, the lighter your steps become. Fear dissolves in the vastness of awareness, like mist under the morning sun. When you live from this space of inner stability, the world no longer feels threatening. You realize that peace does not depend on circumstances, it arises from clarity. The Buddha's teaching is not to suppress emotion, but to see through it, to understand its causes and conditions. Fear, when understood, becomes wisdom. Anxiety, when met with compassion, becomes a doorway to awakening. If this message resonates with you, and you wish to continue exploring how ancient Buddhist wisdom can help you transform fear, anxiety, and suffering into peace and clarity, remember to subscribe to the channel. Your journey toward freedom begins here, through understanding, mindfulness, and compassion. The power of letting go. Letting go is at the very heart of Buddhist wisdom, yet for many people it is also one of the most misunderstood teachings. The phrase itself often evokes resistance, as if letting go means losing what we love, abandoning our dreams, or suppressing our emotions. But in truth, letting go in the Buddhist sense is not about rejecting life. It is about embracing it without clinging. It is the recognition that attachment, not love itself, is the root of suffering. The Buddha taught that everything we hold on to, possessions, people, beliefs, even our self-image, is impermanent. To hold tightly to anything transient is to guarantee anxiety, because deep down we know it cannot last. Letting go, then, is not a loss. It is a liberation from the illusion of control. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the more slips through your fingers. This is how attachment works. When we cling to something, whether it's a relationship, a plan, or a sense of identity, we create tension. The mind becomes preoccupied with maintaining what cannot be fixed. Letting go is opening the hand, allowing the sand to rest gently, allowing life to flow as it must. In that gesture, peace is found. To let go is to trust the impermanence of all things and to live with an open heart that does not demand the world conform to its desires. Buddhism identifies attachment, tanha or craving, as one of the primary causes of suffering. It operates in subtle ways: the craving for pleasure, the craving for existence, and the craving for non-existence. These cravings bind us to cycles of dissatisfaction. Even when we get what we want, the mind quickly shifts to the next desire. The anxiety of not having becomes the anxiety of losing, and thus the cycle continues. The Buddha's insight was that lasting peace does not come from acquiring or avoiding, but from seeing through the illusion that happiness depends on either. Letting go begins when we realize that grasping is futile. One of the most direct ways to experience letting go is through meditation. When you sit in silence, countless thoughts arise: memories, worries, plans, judgments. The beginner's instinct is to chase them or fight them, but the practice of mindfulness invites a different approach. Observe, allow, and release. Thoughts are like leaves floating down a stream. They come, they go. You don't have to push them away or cling to them. You simply let them pass. In doing so, you learn that peace arises not from control, but from surrender. This surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the strength to stop fighting reality. To truly let go, one must first understand the mechanics of attachment. We cling because we believe that possession brings safety. The ego, constructed around the illusion of separateness, fears dissolution. It imagines that without grasping, it will disappear. Yet Buddhism reveals the opposite. It is through non-clinging that we discover our true nature, vast and unbounded. The self that clings is small, fragile, and defensive. The self that lets go is spacious, compassionate, and free. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The same applies to all forms of attachment. Whether it's resentment, desire, or self-importance, holding on hurts the one who holds. Letting go does not mean passivity. It does not mean withdrawing from life or ceasing to care. On the contrary, it allows for a more genuine engagement. When you no longer cling to outcomes, you can act with clarity. You can love without fear, give without expectation, and work without anxiety about results. The Bhagavad Gita, though not a Buddhist text, expresses a truth harmonious with this teaching. You have the right to your actions, but not to the fruits of your actions. Buddhism calls this non-attachment in action, doing your best while accepting that results are beyond control. It is a radical freedom because it releases the mind from the tyranny of what if. Many people mistake letting go for indifference. They imagine it as cold detachment. But the Buddha's path is not about emotional numbness. It is about freedom from bondage. A person who has let go can still feel love, grief, and joy deeply, but they do not drown in them. The difference lies in awareness. When love is free from clinging, it becomes compassion. When grief is free from resistance, it becomes acceptance. When joy is free from craving, it becomes gratitude. The art of letting go transforms every emotion into wisdom. Letting go also means releasing the need to be someone. Much of human anxiety comes from the effort to maintain a fixed identity, to be seen as successful, spiritual, intelligent, or strong. But all such identities are masks that the ego constructs. They are unstable because they depend on others' recognition. The Buddha invited his followers to examine this illusion of I. When you look deeply, you see that what you call I is a collection of changing experiences, body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, none of which you can control or claim as permanent. When this insight dawns, the weight of identity begins to dissolve. You no longer need to prove yourself, you can simply be. The process of letting go can be painful because it feels like dying. In a sense, it is the death of illusions, but it is a sacred death that makes room for life. Like a snake shedding its skin, the self that once clung must fall away for the true being to emerge. The fear that arises during this process is natural. The mind resists change because it equates attachment with safety. Yet when you surrender, you discover a paradox. By letting go of control, you gain serenity. By losing the false self, you discover the infinite. Consider the story of Kisa Gotami, a woman from the Buddha's time whose only child died. Overcome with grief, she carried her child's body from house to house, begging for medicine to bring him back to life. When she came to the Buddha, he told her to bring a mustard seed from any household that had never experienced death. She searched the entire village, but found none. Every home had lost someone. When she returned, she understood the truth of impermanence and found peace. This story illustrates the essence of letting go, not denial, but understanding. We let go when we accept that everything changes. Love remains, but the attachment to permanence dissolves. Anxiety thrives in the soil of control. The mind that insists, I must have this, or I must not lose that, lives in constant tension. Letting go uproots this delusion. You begin to see that control was never real, only the illusion of it. Life unfolds according to countless causes and conditions beyond our grasp. The Buddha's teaching of dependent origination reveals that nothing exists independently. Everything arises in interconnection. When you understand this, you no longer cling to personal authorship. You act with sincerity, but without obsession. Anxiety fades because you are no longer fighting the flow of reality. Letting go also applies to spiritual practice itself. Many seekers become attached to progress, to experiences of calm, insight, or enlightenment. They chase transcendence as others chase wealth or status, but the Buddha warned against attachment even to virtue or wisdom. True freedom comes when you let go of letting go, As the Zen masters say, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. This shocking statement means do not cling to any idea, even the idea of enlightenment. Freedom lies beyond all concepts. When the mind stops grasping, even at truth, it becomes silent. In that silence, awakening happens naturally. The path of letting go unfolds in layers. First, you release external attachments, objects, status, possessions. Then, emotional attachments, anger, resentment, expectations. Finally, mental attachments, beliefs, identities, and even the attachment to non-attachment. Each layer reveals a deeper level of peace. You begin to live as a mirror, reflecting the world but not clinging to reflections. In this state, fear and anxiety lose their foundation. You realize that nothing can truly be taken from you because you own nothing. You are not diminished by loss nor inflated by gain. You simply flow with the rhythm of existence. Practicing letting go in daily life begins with awareness. Notice moments of tension, the urge to control, to argue, to hold on. In those moments, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what am I clinging to right now? It may be a belief, an expectation, or a fear. When you name it, its power weakens. The simple acknowledgement brings clarity. Then visualize releasing it with your exhale. This small act, repeated over time, trains the mind in non-attachment. It's not about forcing release, but allowing it. As the saying goes, you cannot release what you have not first held with awareness. So begin by seeing what binds you. Another powerful practice is generosity, dana. Giving without expecting anything in return cultivates the habit of letting go. Every act of giving, whether material, emotional, or spiritual, loosens the grip of possessiveness. It reminds you that abundance flows through sharing, not hoarding. The Buddha placed generosity at the beginning of the path because it softens the heart and opens the mind. It transforms fear of loss into joy of contribution. Each time you give, you affirm trust in life's abundance. Anxiety diminishes, replaced by gratitude. Letting go also means forgiving. Resentment is a heavy chain that binds the mind to the past. It arises from the belief that others should have behaved differently. But when you understand that all beings act according to their level of awareness and conditioning, forgiveness becomes natural. It does not excuse harm, but releases the poison of hatred. The Buddha compared resentment to drinking poison and expecting the other to die. When you let go of grudges, you free yourself. Forgiveness is self-liberation disguised as mercy. In relationships, letting go means loving without ownership. It means allowing others to be who they are, without demanding that they fulfill your expectations. This does not mean accepting abuse or neglect. It means releasing the illusion that love is control. When you love freely, your relationships become spacious. There is no anxiety about loss, because you understand that love is not something to keep, but something to express. Like a flower, it blooms and fades naturally. You water it while it's alive, and you let it go when it withers, knowing that its fragrance lingers in memory. Letting go of anxiety also involves releasing attachment to thoughts. The mind loves to replay the past and rehearse the future. It clings to stories about what might happen or what should have been. These narratives fuel fear. Mindfulness interrupts this cycle. Each time you return to the breath, you step out of the story and into the present. The Buddha compared this to putting down a burden. When you let go of thoughts, even for a moment, you taste freedom. You realize that beneath all mental noise lies a natural peace. That peace is your true home. Over time, letting go becomes not something you do, but something you are. You live lightly, moving through the world without clinging. You can lose and still smile, fail and still learn, age and still love. This is not detachment, it is mastery. The Buddha's serenity did not come from avoiding pain, but from embracing everything without grasping. His mind was like the sky, open, vast, untouched by the storms that pass through it. You too can cultivate this sky-like mind. Each time you release, you expand. Letting go ultimately reveals the truth of emptiness, shunyata. Emptiness is not nothingness. It is the realization that all phenomena are interdependent and without inherent existence. When you see that nothing stands alone, you stop clinging, you stop fearing. The boundary between self and world dissolves, and compassion arises spontaneously. You understand that to hold on is to suffer, because there is nothing solid to hold. To let go is to align with the natural flow of existence, the dance of causes and conditions that has no beginning or end. In this understanding, anxiety cannot survive. Anxiety depends on the illusion of separation and control. When both dissolve, peace remains. You begin to live effortlessly, like a leaf floating on the river of life. You act, love, and serve, but you no longer carry the burden of possession. You discover what the Buddha meant when he said, "Just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past again and again." Letting go is continual renewal. The journey of letting go is not linear. Some days you feel spacious and serene. Other days, the mind tightens again. But each time you notice, each time you breathe and release, you strengthen the habit of freedom. One day, you realize that even the idea of "my practice" has dissolved. There is only awareness flowing through form. The one who was trying to let go is gone, and what remains is pure being, silent, radiant, at peace. At that point, fear becomes a faint echo, anxiety a distant ripple. You have not escaped life, you have merged with it. The winds of change still blow, but they no longer disturb the depth of your ocean. You live in harmony with the impermanence that once terrified you. This is the power of letting go, the quiet strength that comes from surrendering to what is. It is the doorway to liberation, the bridge between suffering and awakening. If these words speak to your journey, if you wish to continue exploring how the timeless wisdom of Buddhism can help you free your mind from fear and anxiety, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Let this space be your temple of reflection, your community of awakening. Continue walking this path with mindfulness, compassion, and courage. The way of letting go is the way of freedom. Mindfulness and the end of inner turmoil. Mindfulness is the foundation upon which all Buddhist practice rests. It is the art of dwelling fully in the present moment with awareness and clarity, without judgment or resistance. To live mindfully is to see clearly, to be awake to the unfolding of life as it is, without being lost in the fantasies of the past or the anxieties of the future. The Buddha often compared the untrained mind to a monkey jumping from branch to branch, never resting. Mindfulness is the way of taming that restless creature, not through suppression, but through understanding. When mindfulness is developed, fear and anxiety lose their grip because they depend on mental projection, not on the reality of the present. Fear and anxiety are future-oriented. They thrive on what if. They are the shadows cast by the mind's habit of imagining threats that have not yet occurred. Mindfulness, on the other hand, roots you in the now, where those imagined threats do not exist. The present moment is always bearable. It is the mind's resistance to it that creates suffering. When you become mindful, you begin to see that fear is not in the situation itself, but in the story you tell about it. The power of mindfulness lies in its ability to break the identification with these stories. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that knows them. This simple shift in perspective transforms anxiety into curiosity, fear into insight. The Buddha taught sati, or mindfulness, as the first step in the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the four foundations of mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, of feelings, of the mind, and of mental objects. These four dimensions encompass the entirety of human experience. To be mindful of the body is to return to the breath, to anchor awareness in the physical sensations of the present. The body is always here, always now. It does not live in the past or future. When you feel fear, anxiety, or restlessness, return to the body. Notice the tightness in the chest, the rapid heartbeat, the trembling hands. Feel them without resistance. Do not label them as bad. They are simply the body's way of expressing energy. When observed with acceptance, even intense sensations begin to soften. Awareness heals by inclusion, not exclusion. Mindfulness of feelings invites you to notice the tone of experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, without clinging or aversion. Fear and anxiety are unpleasant feelings, but suffering multiplies when you resist them. The Buddha's teaching on the 2 arrows explains this clearly. The first arrow is the pain of experience itself, an inevitable part of life. The second arrow is the mental resistance, the "I don't want this," which creates unnecessary suffering. Mindfulness stops the second arrow. When you allow feelings to exist as they are, without judgment, they pass through you. The storm of anxiety may still blow, but it no longer uproots your peace. You become the sky, not the weather. Mindfulness of mind is observing the quality of consciousness itself. Is the mind calm or restless, spacious or contracted, loving or fearful? Most people are unaware of the state of their mind because they are lost inside it. They mistake their thoughts for reality, but when you watch the mind, you step outside the stream of thinking. You realize that thoughts arise and pass, just like sensations. Fear is seen as a mental event, not an identity. This awareness creates distance between you and your anxiety. You begin to understand that you are not afraid. Fear is simply a temporary visitor in the house of awareness. Mindfulness of mental objects means observing the patterns that shape experience, thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and perceptions. You see how anxiety arises when certain thoughts are believed, how fear grows when you identify with them, and how peace returns when you let them go. Mindfulness turns your own mind into a field of study. You become a scientist of your inner world, investigating causes and effects. You discover that nothing happens randomly. Every mental state has conditions that give rise to it. This understanding is liberating because it replaces helplessness with insight. Anxiety no longer feels like an enemy, but a message from the unconscious, revealing where you are still attached. The practice of mindfulness is deceptively simple. It begins with breathing. The breath is the bridge between body and mind, the rhythm that connects you to life itself. When fear arises, the breath shortens, the body tightens, and the mind races. But if you bring your attention to the breath, just observing it as it flows in and out, you interrupt the cycle. You return to the present. The breath becomes a refuge, a sanctuary where fear cannot survive. As Thich Nhat Hanh often said, feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. This is not poetic metaphor. It is lived truth. Every mindful breath reclaims a moment of freedom from anxiety. Mindfulness also reveals impermanence. When you observe fear closely, you see that it is not a solid wall, but a moving energy. It builds, peaks, and fades. No emotion lasts forever. The mind that believes this fear will never end feeds panic. The mindful mind sees the wave for what it is, rising and falling according to conditions. The recognition of impermanence dissolves fear's illusion of permanence. When you see that all things pass, you stop clinging. Even the deepest anxiety becomes workable. You learn to ride the waves instead of being drowned by them. Another aspect of mindfulness is equanimity, the ability to remain balanced amidst pleasure and pain. Equanimity is not indifference, it is stability. It allows you to meet whatever arises with an open heart. When anxiety comes, you do not push it away. When calm returns, you do not cling to it. You treat both with equal understanding. This even-mindedness frees you from the endless oscillation between craving and aversion, the root of suffering. Equanimity is the natural outcome of deep mindfulness, where awareness becomes so steady that no experience can shake it. The modern world often confuses mindfulness with mere relaxation, but true mindfulness is far more profound. It is not about escaping discomfort, but embracing it fully. It is not about emptying the mind, but seeing its contents clearly. It is an act of courage, the willingness to face oneself without distortion. In mindfulness, fear is not an obstacle but a teacher. It shows you where your attachments lie, what stories the ego still tells, what illusions you still believe. Each moment of mindfulness reveals a deeper truth, that behind the restless surface of thought there is a stillness that was never afraid. As mindfulness deepens, the boundaries between observer and observed begin to fade. The practice shifts from "I am aware of fear" to "awareness is present." This subtle but profound change dismantles the duality at the heart of suffering. When there is no I and my fear, only awareness knowing itself, freedom dawns. The Buddha described this awakening as seeing things as they really are. In that seeing, anxiety cannot take root, because there is no one left to be anxious. There is only the flow of life, perfectly complete in each moment. The integration of mindfulness into daily life is where the real transformation happens. Meditation on a cushion is training. Life itself is the test. The Buddha's instructions were simple. Be mindful when standing, walking, sitting, or lying down. Be mindful when eating, drinking, speaking, or listening. In other words, live fully present. When washing dishes, wash dishes. When walking, just walk. Anxiety often creeps in because the mind is elsewhere, thinking of what comes next or what has been lost. Mindfulness reunites body and mind in the same place at the same time. In that union, peace arises spontaneously. Consider moments of ordinary anxiety. Waiting in traffic, anticipating a meeting, scrolling through the endless stream of news. Each of these moments offers a chance to awaken. Instead of being consumed by irritation or fear, you can pause and breathe. You can notice the sensations in the body, the sounds around you, the rhythm of life continuing despite your thoughts. The world becomes vivid again. This shift from reaction to observation is the essence of mindfulness. Anxiety feeds on absence. When you are not here, presence starves it. Mindfulness also transforms relationships. When you are truly present with another person, without projecting expectations or judgments, a deep connection forms. You listen not to respond, but to understand. You see that the other's fears and desires are not so different from your own. Compassion arises naturally. Fear divides. Mindfulness unites. It dissolves the illusion of separation that fuels anxiety. You realize that we are all waves in the same ocean, expressions of the same consciousness. In Buddhist tradition, mindfulness is often paired with clear comprehension, sampajanya, knowing not only what you are doing, but why. This awareness of purpose prevents mindfulness from becoming mechanical. It brings wisdom into every act. When you are mindful of anxiety arising, clear comprehension helps you see its causes: attachment to control, fear of loss, identification with thoughts. Seeing this clearly, you can respond skillfully rather than react habitually. Mindfulness without wisdom is like a lamp without oil. It may shine briefly, but cannot sustain light. Together, mindfulness and wisdom dissolve ignorance, the root of fear. Scientific research now confirms what the Buddha discovered millennia ago. Mindfulness reduces stress, lowers anxiety, and increases emotional resilience. But these are side effects, not the ultimate goal. The purpose of mindfulness is liberation, freedom from the compulsive patterns that enslave the mind. It is about discovering that peace is not something to be achieved, but something already present when the noise subsides. Fear and anxiety are like waves on the surface. Mindfulness reveals the vast stillness beneath. When you practice mindfulness long enough, you begin to experience moments of pure awareness, gaps between thoughts where time seems to stop. In those gaps, there is no fear, no desire, no anxiety, only being. These glimpses are the taste of nirvana, the extinguishing of the fires of craving, aversion, and delusion. They show you that freedom is not somewhere else. It is here, hidden behind the veil of distraction. The Buddha called this realization the end of suffering, not because life stops being difficult, but because the mind stops resisting it. Mindfulness does not require you to become a monk or withdraw from the world. It is available in every moment, in every breath. It asks only that you show up. Anxiety fades, not when life becomes perfect, but when you stop demanding that it be. The perfection is already in the presence itself. When you walk mindfully, each step is freedom. When you breathe mindfully, each breath is peace. The ordinary becomes sacred, the mundane divine. Eventually, mindfulness becomes effortless. Awareness flows naturally through all experience. Even fear, when it arises, is seen as part of the dance. You smile to it, as the Buddha taught. Breathing in, I know fear is here. Breathing out, I smile to my fear. This simple act transforms the energy of fear into the energy of awakening. You realize that nothing needs to be eliminated. Everything needs to be understood. Fear was never the enemy. It was the doorway through which mindfulness entered. When mindfulness matures, anxiety cannot take root because the soil of ignorance has been cleared. You live with open eyes and an open heart. The world continues to change. Challenges still arise, but you meet them with presence, not panic. You see clearly that life is not happening to you. It is happening through you. The witness and the witnessed are one. This is the end of inner turmoil, the birth of serenity. If this lesson on mindfulness resonates with you and you wish to keep deepening your journey into the wisdom of the Buddha, to transform fear, anxiety, and confusion into peace and clarity, remember to subscribe to the channel. Continue walking this path with mindfulness, insight, and compassion. The more you awaken to the present moment, the more you realize that freedom was never elsewhere. It was here all along, waiting for you to notice. The illusion of control and the freedom of acceptance. Human beings spend much of their lives trying to control the uncontrollable. We plan, we anticipate, we resist, and we fight against the unfolding of events as if the universe owed us obedience. This illusion of control is one of the deepest roots of fear and anxiety. The Buddha's teaching reveals that control is the great mirage of the ego, an attempt to impose permanence on an impermanent world. When you try to control what cannot be controlled, time, others, the future, even your own thoughts, you create friction with reality. That friction is suffering. The mind becomes a battlefield, endlessly strategizing how to secure what can never be secured. Freedom begins when you see through this illusion and surrender to the truth of impermanence. Acceptance is not resignation but wisdom. It is the understanding that life flows according to causes and conditions, and that peace comes not from mastery over events, but from harmony with them. From the moment we wake up, the mind starts constructing expectations. It wants the weather to be pleasant, people to be kind, the day to unfold smoothly. When these expectations are met, we feel at ease. When they are not, irritation or anxiety arises. But look closely. The world was never obliged to follow our plans. Events happen according to countless interdependent factors, most beyond our control. The Buddha called this pratyasamutpada, or dependent origination. Everything arises because of conditions. Nothing stands alone. When you deeply see this, the urge to control begins to soften. You realize that you are part of the flow, not its master. The leaf on the river does not resist the current. It moves with grace because it does not imagine it has power over the water. To live with such grace is to live without fear. The illusion of control often disguises itself as responsibility. We believe we must hold everything together, our careers, families, reputations, emotions, but this burden is unsustainable because it's based on a false premise, that life depends on our constant intervention. When you cling to control, you become tense, anxious, and defensive. Every uncertainty becomes a threat. The mind becomes like a clenched fist, incapable of opening to the present moment. The Buddha's wisdom invites the opposite movement, an unclenching, a softening. Acceptance does not mean giving up effort, it means giving up resistance. You still act, but you no longer demand that the outcome conform to your will. This distinction changes everything. You move from striving to flowing, from anxiety to ease. To understand why control creates fear, you must look at how the ego operates. The ego is a psychological construct built around the belief, I am separate. It seeks security in an insecure world by trying to manipulate circumstances. It fears loss because it believes that its existence depends on possession and certainty. But no amount of control can satisfy the ego because the world is inherently uncertain. The future is unknowable, and everything is in flux. The harder you try to stabilize life, the more unstable it seems. This is why people who cling most tightly to order often feel the most anxiety. Control feeds the illusion of power, but deep down, the heart knows it's fragile. True security lies not in control, but in surrender to the wisdom of impermanence, to the law of cause and effect, to the mystery of existence. In Buddhism, acceptance is not passive. It is an active seeing, a conscious acknowledgement of reality. It begins with awareness, noticing how often you argue with life. You can see this in small things. A delayed train, an unexpected comment, a plan gone wrong. The mind immediately reacts. This shouldn't be happening. That reaction is the seed of suffering. Acceptance interrupts that pattern. It says, this is what's happening, not as a defeat but as a recognition. When you accept the present moment, you align yourself with truth. Resistance is a refusal to see things as they are. Acceptance is seeing clearly. In that clarity, fear loses its power because fear thrives on denial. The more you accept, the freer you become. Consider the Buddha's serenity in the face of constant impermanence. He lived with sickness, betrayal, misunderstanding, and loss. Yet his peace remained unshaken, not because he controlled these events, but because he accepted them fully. His teaching was simple. Whatever has the nature to arise will also cease. This understanding transforms how you relate to every experience. Anxiety is born from trying to hold on to what's changing or push away what's already here. Acceptance dissolves both tendencies. When you stop grasping and resisting, the heart rests. Peace is not something you create, it's what remains when you stop fighting. Acceptance also requires humility, the willingness to admit that you do not know. The ego wants certainty, but life is a mystery too vast to be grasped. We imagine that control brings safety, but often it only brings rigidity. When you let go of needing to know, a new kind of intelligence emerges, an intuitive wisdom that flows with the present. This is the wisdom the Buddha called prajna. It arises not from calculation, but from silence. When the mind is still, the natural order of things reveals itself. You begin to see that the universe is not chaotic, but deeply intelligent. What we call uncertainty is just the unfolding of causes beyond our comprehension. Trusting this process is the essence of faith in Buddhism. Not blind belief, but confidence in the Dharma, the way things are. One of the most powerful practices for dissolving the illusion of control is meditation on impermanence. Sit quietly and observe the breath. Notice how each inhalation arises and passes away, how no breath can be held. Then observe your thoughts, appearing, disappearing, replaced by others. Observe sensations, emotions, sounds, all in constant flux. Everything is movement. When you see this clearly, the desire to control begins to feel absurd, like trying to stop waves from reaching the shore. Impermanence is not the enemy. It is the rhythm of life itself. Fear and anxiety shrink in the face of this understanding because they rely on the fantasy of permanence. When you embrace change, fear transforms into wonder. You begin to see each moment as sacred precisely because it will not last. Acceptance also extends to yourself. Many people suffer not from what happens externally, but from their resistance to who they are. They judge their emotions, criticize their thoughts, and reject their imperfections. But as long as you are at war with yourself, peace will remain distant. The Buddha's teaching of compassion begins here, with acceptance of your own humanity. Mindfulness allows you to see your flaws without condemnation, your fears without shame. You begin to understand that everything arising within you, anger, sorrow, doubt, is part of the human condition. To accept yourself is to align with reality. Only through this alignment can transformation occur. Change begins with acceptance, not resistance. You cannot release what you have not first embraced. Acceptance does not mean you never act to improve your circumstances. It means you act from clarity, not from fear. When action arises from acceptance, it is skillful. When it arises from resistance, it is blind. The Buddha called this right effort, one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. Right effort is not driven by anxiety or compulsion, but by wisdom. You do what can be done, and you let go of what cannot. Anxiety always wants to do more, to fix, to control. Acceptance knows when to stop. It trusts the unfolding of events without apathy. This balance between engagement and surrender is the art of living. The illusion of control also manifests in relationships. We try to change others, to make them behave as we wish. We confuse love with possession, care with manipulation. This dynamic creates constant tension. But when you accept others as they are, without trying to mold them, love becomes free. Acceptance does not mean approving harmful behavior, but it means seeing clearly that everyone acts from their own conditioning, fears, and level of awareness. You stop demanding that others satisfy your expectations. The space that opens in acceptance allows genuine connection. Anxiety in relationships often comes from the fear of losing control over affection, attention, or outcome. But when you let go of control, love becomes spacious. You no longer love to get, you love to give. That is true freedom. Buddhism teaches that everything from the movement of galaxies to the flutter of a leaf unfolds through interdependence. To imagine that one small self can control this vast network is the height of delusion. Yet this delusion dominates modern consciousness. We try to manage every variable, health, success, image, believing that control equals safety. But control is brittle. It collapses when reality diverges from our plans. Acceptance, however, is flexible. It bends but does not break. It allows life to move through you rather than against you. The Buddha compared the awakened mind to water. It adapts to every container, yet remains unchanged in essence. Acceptance gives you that fluidity. When fear arises, you no longer panic. You flow around it. You respond instead of react. The practice of acceptance is not instantaneous. It unfolds gradually as mindfulness deepens. Start by observing moments of resistance in daily life. When you catch yourself saying, "This shouldn't be happening," pause. Ask, "Can I let this be as it is?" That simple question interrupts the habitual pattern of control. Sometimes the answer will be no, but even that awareness is progress. With practice, the mind learns to release its grip. Anxiety softens, replaced by trust. Trust is the natural child of acceptance. It's not trust in specific outcomes, but in the process itself. You begin to feel that whatever happens, you will be okay, not because you can control it, but because you can meet it with awareness. Letting go of control also means letting go of time. Anxiety thrives on the future. It lives in the gap between now and later. Acceptance collapses that gap. When you live in the present, time loses its power to threaten you. The Buddha described nirvana as the timeless state. It is not another world, but the direct experience of reality, unfiltered by fear of what comes next. Every moment, fully accepted, is eternal. The mind that stops grasping at the future discovers an infinite peace hidden in the now. This realization changes the way you experience everything, from eating to working to simply breathing. Each act becomes complete in itself, not a means to an end. The anxiety that once drove you dissolves because there is nowhere to go and nothing to control. Acceptance also teaches patience. The modern mind is addicted to immediacy. It wants results instantly. But spiritual growth follows the pace of nature, not the speed of ambition. The Buddha compared practice to planting seeds. You cannot force them to grow. You can only nurture the conditions, water, sunlight, soil, and trust the process. Anxiety comes from wanting the fruit before the flower. Acceptance trusts that things unfold when the time is right. It replaces impatience with faith, not in a deity, but in the Dharma, the natural law of becoming. When you trust this unfolding, you stop pushing life. You relax into it. That relaxation is freedom. Paradoxically, acceptance also gives rise to power, the power of peace. When you no longer need to control, your energy becomes available for presence. You act from stillness, not struggle. Others may interpret your calm as detachment, but it is strength. A mind free from compulsion is a mind capable of clarity. The Buddha's serenity in the face of adversity was not indifference, it was mastery. He understood that nothing external could rob him of peace, because peace was not dependent on circumstances. Acceptance is the gateway to this invincibility. When you stop fighting reality, reality becomes your ally. In the modern world, the illusion of control has reached unprecedented levels. Technology promises to predict everything, from weather to emotions, yet anxiety rates soar. The more we attempt to control life, the more fragile we become. Buddhism offers the antidote: surrender to what is. This surrender is not defeat, it is alignment with truth. It brings dignity, calm, and compassion. When you stop demanding that life be different, you start appreciating it as it is. Gratitude naturally arises. Every breath becomes enough. Every moment becomes home. Acceptance also opens the heart to compassion for others trapped in the same illusion. You begin to see how much suffering comes from trying to control what cannot be controlled, how wars, conflicts, and personal heartbreaks all stem from resistance to reality. Compassion softens judgment. You no longer see people as obstacles, but as fellow travelers lost in the same maze of control and fear. Your presence becomes healing because it embodies what others crave: peace without condition. In this way, acceptance not only liberates you, but radiates outward, transforming the world around you. Ultimately, acceptance leads to surrender to the mystery of existence. The Buddha never tried to explain everything. He pointed toward awakening, not answers. He understood that reality is vast and that peace comes not from solving the mystery, but from merging with it. When you accept that you do not need to understand or control life, you open yourself to awe. Anxiety transforms into reverence. You see that each moment is a miracle, arising and passing in perfect order. What once felt like chaos now reveals itself as dance. The ego dissolves into silence, and in that silence, freedom dawns. This is the true meaning of the end of fear, the recognition that there was never anything to control, nothing to defend. Life has always been unfolding exactly as it must. The only disturbance was the mind's refusal to let it. Acceptance is awakening to the way things are. It is the return to peace that was never lost. If these reflections resonate with your journey and you wish to continue exploring how Buddhist wisdom can help you live free from anxiety and fear, remember to subscribe to the channel. Continue walking this path of awareness, surrender, and understanding. The illusion of control fades with each breath of acceptance, and what remains is the boundless serenity that has always been waiting within you. The path of compassion and the healing of the heart. In the end, every Buddhist teaching, whether it speaks of mindfulness, impermanence, or non-self, returns to compassion. Compassion is not an optional virtue, but the very expression of awakening. It is the natural fragrance of wisdom. When you truly see the nature of suffering, your own and that of others, Your heart softens, not out of sentimentality, but from understanding. Compassion is what transforms fear into love, anxiety into connection, and isolation into unity. It is the force that dissolves the illusion of separateness that lies at the root of all suffering. To walk the path of compassion is to rediscover your original nature, the open, tender awareness that embraces all beings without preference or prejudice. Fear and anxiety shrink the heart. They turn attention inward and make the self the center of the universe. Compassion reverses that contraction. It opens the field of awareness outward, reminding you that you are part of something vast. When the mind is trapped in fear, it says, "I am alone." Compassion says, "We all suffer, and therefore we are not alone." This shift from self-centeredness to interconnectedness is liberation. It does not eliminate pain, but it changes its meaning. Suffering ceases to be punishment and becomes the doorway to empathy. Every moment of anxiety, every tear of fear becomes a bridge to others who feel the same. The Buddha's awakening was not the end of compassion, but its beginning. Having understood suffering, he dedicated his life to relieving it. This is the essence of the path. To cultivate compassion, Buddhism teaches karuna and metta, compassion and loving kindness, as twin wings of the awakened heart. Loving kindness is the wish that all beings be happy. Compassion is the wish that all beings be free from suffering. Together, they form the emotional counterpart of wisdom. Without wisdom, compassion can become pity or sentimentality. Without compassion, wisdom becomes cold. When they unite, the heart and mind become one. Anxiety cannot survive in such a heart, because anxiety is the symptom of separation. Compassion dissolves that separation. It is the medicine that heals the illusion of me versus the world. The practice of compassion begins with yourself. Many people misunderstand this, believing that self-compassion is selfish, but self-hatred is simply another form of ego. When you reject yourself, you reinforce the division between me and what should be. The Buddha taught that compassion must include all beings, and you are one of them. To extend compassion to yourself is to recognize your own humanity, the same fear, confusion, and longing that you see in others. It means treating yourself as you would treat a dear friend who is suffering. When you hold your own pain with tenderness, anxiety loses its power. You stop adding self-judgment to fear and begin to heal from within. Self-compassion does not mean indulgence. It means honesty without cruelty. It means acknowledging mistakes without collapsing into shame. When you practice self-compassion, you begin to see that perfection was never the goal. Presence was. Fear often arises from the demand to be flawless, to control how others see you. But when you accept your imperfections with kindness, fear melts into humility. You realize that the heart's value lies not in its purity, but in its openness. This understanding is the beginning of healing. As you heal yourself, you naturally become a source of healing for others. To develop compassion, the Buddha prescribed the practice of metta bhavana, or loving-kindness meditation. It begins with simple phrases repeated silently. May I be safe, may I be peaceful, may I be free from suffering. You breathe these words into your heart, letting them resonate like a gentle chant. Then gradually you extend them outward, to a loved one, to a neutral person, to someone difficult, and finally to all beings everywhere. This practice rewires the emotional habits of the mind. It dissolves hostility, softens resentment, and replaces fear with goodwill. Over time, you discover that compassion is not something you create, but something you uncover. It was always there beneath the layers of defense. Compassion is not weakness, it is courage in its purest form, the courage to remain open in a world that wounds. Fear closes the heart, compassion keeps it open. When you respond to pain with understanding rather than avoidance, you access a power that fear can never touch. The Buddha described this as the boundless heart. It is like the ocean, receiving all rivers, polluted or pure, without judgment. The ocean does not shrink from what flows into it. Likewise, the compassionate heart does not reject the world's suffering. It embraces it and transforms it. This transformation happens not through effort, but through presence. When you are fully present with suffering, your own or another's, it begins to dissolve. What remains is love. Anxiety often arises from the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. Compassion counters this by reminding you of your shared humanity. No one is exempt from pain. No one is beyond redemption. When you understand this, you stop competing in the silent contest of suffering. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "Why not all of us?" This question opens the door to empathy. You see that every person you meet carries invisible burdens: the stranger's anger, the colleague's coldness, the loved one's silence. Each is a reflection of their own struggle. Instead of reacting with defensiveness, compassion allows you to respond with patience. Fear separates, compassion connects. True compassion, however, does not mean enabling harm or ignoring injustice. It means acting from clarity, not reactivity. The Buddha's compassion was fierce when necessary. He spoke truth to delusion, but without hatred. This is known as upaya, or skillful means, the ability to respond to suffering in whatever form is most beneficial. Sometimes compassion is gentle, offering comfort. Sometimes it is firm, setting boundaries. Both arise from the same understanding, that all beings act from ignorance, and that wisdom, not punishment, brings freedom. When anxiety tempts you to withdraw from life's chaos, compassion invites you back, to engage without fear, to love without attachment, to act without aggression. One of the most powerful aspects of compassion is its capacity to dissolve the illusion of the separate self. When you feel deep empathy for another's pain, the boundaries between I and you blur. You recognize that consciousness is shared, that the suffering of one being reverberates through all. This realization, called anatta, is not philosophical but experiential. In compassion, the self dissolves naturally. There is no longer the anxious me trying to protect itself, because there is no longer a separate entity to protect. What remains is pure presence, love without an owner. In this state, fear has no ground to stand on. The one who was afraid is gone. Compassion also transforms how you perceive the world. When you cultivate it, everything becomes part of your practice. The cry of a child, the struggle of an enemy, the beauty of a sunset. You begin to sense the sacredness of existence in every form. This awareness deepens gratitude. Instead of resenting life's difficulties, you see them as invitations to grow in understanding. Each moment of pain becomes a teacher. Anxiety diminishes because you no longer resist experience. You meet it with curiosity and care. Even fear becomes an opportunity to expand the heart. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love." The same is true of fear. It does not cease by suppression, but by compassion. Compassion must be practiced deliberately, especially in times of stress. When fear arises, the instinct is to contract, to protect oneself. But if you pause and breathe, you can choose to open instead. You can silently repeat, "May I meet this fear with kindness." I then extend that wish outward. May all who feel this fear be free. This simple act shifts the energy from self-absorption to universal care. It reminds you that fear is not personal. It is part of the human condition. In recognizing this, you connect with the shared vulnerability that unites all beings. That connection is healing. The heart expands, and anxiety loses its isolation. In Buddhist psychology, compassion and wisdom are inseparable. Wisdom sees the emptiness of all things. Compassion fills that emptiness with love. When wisdom is deep, compassion flows effortlessly. When compassion is deep, wisdom arises naturally. They are two expressions of the same realization, that the self and the world are one. To live from this understanding is to live without fear. You still act, speak, and think, but the motivation changes from defense to service, from anxiety to generosity. You no longer seek to protect yourself from life. You become a participant in life's healing. Every act becomes an offering. Compassion also teaches forgiveness. Holding resentment is like carrying a burning coal. It hurts only the one who carries it. Forgiveness does not mean condoning harm. It means releasing the weight of hatred. When you forgive, you acknowledge the pain, but refuse to let it define you. You understand that the person who hurt you acted from their own suffering. This insight does not justify their behavior, but it frees you from the prison of bitterness. Fear thrives in closed hearts. Forgiveness opens them. As you release others, you release yourself. The peace that follows is the quiet song of compassion realized. In moments of despair, when the world seems cruel and meaningless, compassion keeps the flame of hope alive. It reminds you that even in darkness, kindness matters. A small act of care, a gentle word, a moment of listening can ripple through existence in ways you cannot imagine. The Buddha taught that even a single thought of loving kindness has the power to transform the mind. This is not metaphorical. Neuroscience now shows that compassion practice rewires the brain, increasing empathy and emotional resilience. But long before science confirmed it, the sages knew the heart trained in compassion becomes fearless. It cannot be destroyed because it no longer clings to itself. To live a life of compassion is to live beyond anxiety. When your focus shifts from protecting yourself to serving others, fear diminishes, the ego's walls crumble, and what remains is a vast luminous space where joy naturally arises. This joy is not dependent on conditions. It is the joy of being connected to all life. You may still feel sadness or pain, but they are held within a larger awareness of love. Compassion transforms even suffering into meaning. The tears you shed for others become holy water, cleansing the mind of separateness. The practice of compassion extends beyond personal relationships. It includes animals, plants, the earth, and even those who seem unworthy of it. The Buddha embraced all beings without exception. When you look at the world through compassionate eyes, you see the same life beating in every form. This vision dissolves the boundaries that anxiety builds. You can no longer view existence as hostile because you see yourself in everything. The forest, the ocean, the stranger's face, all mirror your own essence. In that reflection, fear disappears. You realize that to harm another is to harm yourself, and to love another is to awaken further. Compassion thus becomes both the path and the goal. As compassion matures, it transcends even emotion. It becomes a state of being. You no longer have to try to be kind. Kindness flows naturally. You no longer strive to love. Love is the air you breathe. This is what the Buddha called Mahakaruna, great compassion, compassion without object, without limit. It is not dependent on the worthiness of the recipient or the effort of the giver. It is spontaneous, effortless, like the sun shining on all equally. In this state, anxiety cannot exist because there is no boundary for it to inhabit. Only vast awareness remains, embracing all that arises and passes. To walk the path of compassion is to return to the source. It is to recognize that everything you feared, resisted, or fought against was simply calling for love. Fear itself is a cry for compassion. When you meet it with understanding instead of judgment, it transforms. This is the alchemy of the heart, the turning of suffering into wisdom. You begin to see that every experience, no matter how painful, has served to open you further. Compassion does not protect you from life. It prepares you to meet life fully. It is the realization that love and loss, joy and sorrow are not opposites, but partners in awakening. The world needs compassion more than ever. Anxiety, division, and violence all stem from hearts that have forgotten their unity. But you can be a beacon of remembrance. You can embody the Buddha's teaching not by preaching, but by presence. When you walk with compassion, your very being becomes a refuge. Others feel safe around you because you radiate what they have forgotten, the simple assurance that love is possible even in pain. This is how the transformation of one heart becomes the transformation of many. Compassion also deepens gratitude. As you open to the suffering of others, you recognize the blessings in your own life. Gratitude and compassion feed each other like two rivers merging. Gratitude grounds compassion. Compassion expands gratitude. Together, they create a heart too vast for fear. Gratitude says, "Thank you for this moment." Compassion says, "May this moment bless all beings." When you live this way, anxiety has no place to settle. Each breath becomes a prayer of inclusion. The final flowering of compassion is joy in others' happiness, known as mudita. When you can celebrate others' success without envy, their peace without resentment, your heart is free. Fear competes, compassion rejoices. The Buddha described mudita as one of the divine abodes, mental states that reflect the awakened mind. Living in these abodes, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, you transcend the narrow confines of self. You dwell in spacious awareness, where nothing can threaten you. This is the true end of anxiety, not the absence of problems, but the presence of love. To practice compassion in a fearful world is an act of rebellion, the most radical revolution. It dismantles the machinery of hate, greed, and delusion. It heals not only the individual but the collective mind. When you embody compassion, you become a field of peace that influences everything around you. You need not preach or persuade. Your being itself communicates what words cannot. The Buddha said, "Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened." Compassion is that flame. It multiplies endlessly, dispelling the darkness of fear wherever it reaches. As this journey through the 7 Buddhist lessons draws near its end, remember that compassion is both the culmination and the foundation. Without it, wisdom is incomplete. With it, every fear becomes sacred, every anxiety a teacher, every heartache an opportunity to love more deeply. Compassion does not ask that you be fearless. It shows you that love is stronger than fear. In the quiet light of that truth, the heart rests. If this exploration of compassion has touched you, if you wish to continue walking this path of understanding and peace, remember to subscribe to the channel. Let these teachings accompany you as you practice mindfulness, acceptance, and kindness in your daily life. The path of the Buddha is not a path of escape, but of awakening. Walk it with a compassionate heart, and you will discover that freedom was never somewhere else. It was the love that has always lived within you.